Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. In this video I want to show you guys how to draft, cut and sew a bustier with a crinoline neckline. So this is what I'm going to be working with. I'm helping a client of mine to upcycle this dress which another fashion designer made for her. You can see the corset is not corseting, so I'm going to change the bodice for this gown and also make some other little alterations. So I'm just going to cut the bodice off of this dress because I won't be needing this for anything. This video is divided into 3 parts. The first part is going to be for drafting the pattern. The second part is cutting the pattern on the fabric, and the third part of the video will be explaining how to sew the pieces together. I'm going to start by marking a straight line at the top of my brown paper, and then it's from this straight line that I'm going to take all of my measurements. So I'm going to just place my tape vertically and mark my bust point, my under bust points and my half length, and draw a straight line horizontally from that point which I have marked. Next, I'm going to take my shoulder measurement. The shoulder I'm working with is 15 inches. 15 divided by 2 will give me 7.5 inch. So I'm going to mark that and also mark my neck measurement, which is 3 inches. From that my shoulder point, I will go down by 1 inch and connect this to the 3-inch mark, and this is my shoulder slope. From the shoulder slope, I'm going to take the armhole measurements of 7.5 inch and connect this. From that point, I'm going to draw my chest line. The next thing I'm going to do is mark out my bust span. The bust span I'm using here is 7 divided by 2, 3.5. And then I'll go to my shoulder point and divide this into 2. That is from the 3-inch mark to the shoulder slope. I'm going to take what is there and divide this into 2. And that is what I'm going to be connecting together. So I'm going to connect from that shoulder point to the bust point, and then from there draw a straight line for my bust span. Next now we need to take is our suppressions. I'm working with a bust measurement of 35 inches, so I'm going to suppress a total of 2.5 inch, and this suppression will be at the under bust, which will connect to the half length as well. So towards the center front, I'm going to suppress 0.75 inch at the under bust and at the half length, and towards the side I will suppress 1.25 inch, and I'm just going to connect the 2 points together. I forgot to draw out my armhole curve, so that's just what I'm going to do now. For the front of an armhole, you have to come in by 1/2 inch, so you find the midpoint of the armhole line, and from that point go in by 1/2 inch. Then I'll use my ruler to connect everything together. To take the suppressions at the top, you have to first of all determine the neckline. I don't want the chest to be too exposed, and I'm doing a sweetheart neckline for this style. So I'm going to just come down by 5 inch at the side, at the armhole, and then mark 6 inch at the center front. This is just me extending the chest line. So I came up from the chest line by about 1.5 inch, and I'm just going to connect that armhole point to the center front, as you can see. If you don't mind the cleavages, you can actually connect this straight to the chest line and also come down from the armhole a bit. So now I want to take the suppressions at the neckline. I'm suppressing 2 inches at the neckline. So I'm going to mark 0.75 inch towards the center front and 1.25 inch towards the side. And then what I want to do now is connect everything together. So before I connect this together, I'm going to mark 1/2 inch at the top and at the bottom from the bust point, and the reason why I'm doing this is to prevent any sharp edge. So you can see the way I placed my tape, and I marked 1/2 inch at the top and at the bottom from the bust point, and then I'm just going to use my ruler to connect the suppression at the neckline to that 1/2 inch point, and I use my curve ruler to connect the one from the under bust to the 1/2 inch I marked below the bust point. So the next thing we're going to do is draw out the crinoline neckline, and to do this I'm just going to connect from this part of the bustier to the 3-inch mark which I marked earlier for the neckline. Is actually as simple as that. So next thing I'm going to do now is take my body measurement. I'm going to start with the half length. I'm going to first take the waist measurement, then I replace the dart intake before marking 1.5 inch for my sewing allowance. I'm also taking my under bust measurement, and then I'm replacing the suppression and adding my 1.5 inch sewing allowance. For my bust point, I'm just going to take my measurements as it is and add the sewing allowance since there is no separation there. And then for my chest line, whatever I have my bust point is what will be on my chest line. Now that little suppression, you can see that I took off the chest line of about half of an inch. I am going to replace it, then add my 1.5 inch sewing allowance. And I'm just going to connect everything together. You can see that it's looking a bit weird when I try to follow the exact point I marked. So I just try to make this blend out as much as I can. The next thing I'm going to do is replace the short edge from the Bustier cup curve. So the side going towards the center front is 8.5 inch when I measured it, and the curve going towards the side is 9.5 inch, which means that there's a shortage of 1 inch, and I'm just going to replace that and extend the line and connect this back to the neckline. If you don't do this, when you try to join your fabric together, you'll notice that one part is shorter than the other. So you can see that when I bend my brown paper, when I fold it in, both sides are aligned, right? If I had not extended the side going towards the center front by that 1 inch, it would have not aligned when I try to sew my piece together. So just keep that in mind. Next thing I'm going to do is take my shoulder dart, and for this I'm going to come down by 1 inch from the bust point and connect this straight to the bust span. So this is me marking out the part that is going to be cut off. The concept of shoulder dart is that you are suppressing the difference between the back half length and the front half length. So the back half length is 15 and the front half length is 16. So that is what I took off for my shoulder dart. Now I'm just going to cut everything out. So you can decide to cut out this side part of the bustier together with the neckline and the strap as just one piece, but I want to connect mine like a yoke, so I'm going to separate it. So now next thing I want to do is take the shoulder dart in. So to do that, I'm just going to slash this line and then raise this and just place this over it and fuse this together using my paper tape. After doing this, especially if you are taking more than 1 inch, you will notice that there is a bit of shortage at the side. I zoomed in so that you guys can see it properly. So I'm just going to replace this with another brown paper. So I just grab my brown paper and placed this under the pattern, and then I use my paper tape to join them together. So to create the basque effect for this style, I'm going to join these two pieces together and use my paper tape to hold it in place. Then I'll place another brown paper under this and draw out my basque waistline. I decided to come down from the half length by 4 inches. So I'm going to mark that 4 inches and draw a straight line from that point. And then from that 4 inch, I'm just going to connect this straight to the side using a slanted line. And just like that, I have my basque waistline. This is just me defining the line that separates the center front from the side front. Okay, so that is all for the basque waistline. I'm just going to go ahead and cut this out. So for those of you that are wondering why I did not replace the suppressions I took at the neckline at the armhole, the reason I did not replace that suppression is because if I do that, it's going to affect the fitting of the bustier. The whole reason for doing a bustier is to tighten that area and give a cup effect. So if I replace what I suppressed at the neckline at the armhole point, it is going to affect the fitting of the bustier. Although there are exceptions to this, like when you're making a strapless bustier, for example, but that is not what we are doing in this video. So no, I will not be replacing the suppression at the armhole. Next thing I want to do now is work on the back pattern. So I'm just going to place my tape rule and mark my half length. The half length for the back will be 15 inches. Remember, I took side darts at the front pattern because the back half length is shorter than the front half length by 1 inch. So I marked my half length of 15 inches and then I marked my bust point. The under bust will not really be relevant for the back pattern. So I'm also going to mark out my zipper allowance. I'm using 1.5 inch for my zip allowance. So I'm just marking this out before I start taking my measurements. So from that line that separates the zip allowance, I'm going to mark my shoulder point and my neck point, which is 7.5 inch and 3 inch. Then I'll come down again by 1 inch for my shoulder stoop, just like I did for the front pattern. Next thing I'm going to do is mark my armhole measurement of 7.5 inches. So I'm going to mark that out and also draw a straight line from there. This line is my chest line. So I'm going to draw a straight line and then I'm going to also draw a straight line for my bust point and then connect the line that represents my armhole. For the back armhole, I will not be coming in by 1/2 inch. We don't do that when drafting out the armhole for a back pattern. So I'm just going to place my armhole curve and draw it like that without coming in by 1/2 inch. The next thing I'm going to do is mark out my bust span. So I'm going to mark 3.5 inch just like I did for the front piece, and this is going to be all the way to my chest line. I'm going to mark a straight line connecting everything together. Then I'm going to take in my dart. I decided to use 0.75 inch on both sides for this instead of 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to mark that out and then draw a straight line from that point to my chest line, and that is all for the back dart. After doing that, I'm going to go ahead and take all of my body measurements. So I've taken my bust measurements. I replaced that tiny darts intake at the bust point. Yeah, okay. And then I'm also going to replace the dart I took at my waistline. So I took my waist measurements and I replaced the 1.5 inch which I took in for my dart. And whatever I have my bust point is what is going to be at my chest line. So I just connected all of this together. So to prevent zip bug, I'm going to come in from my center back, that's the zip allowance, by 1/2 inch. And I'm just going to redraw my zipper allowance. So that 1/2 inch is going to be cut off. In case if you have been wondering why the back of your dress or blouse is always bulging out when you zip up, it's most likely because you did not do this. So keep that in mind when you are drafting your pattern. Next thing I'm going to do is draw out the neckline. So I'm going to go with a depth of 1.5 inch and I'm just going to connect this together. I'm doing this because I want the neck to be high up, plus it's a Queen Anne neckline. If you notice, most blouses with a Queen Anne neckline, the back is usually high up, so you can't be doing a deep V neck or a canoe neck or deep round neck for that. So this is just me showing you guys ways that you can cut out the back, but I decided to not even do any of that at all and I just went straight to cut out my pattern. So this is what the pattern looked like after I finished cutting it out. I went ahead to pin the front pattern together so that you guys can have a visual of what it will look like on a fabric. So next thing I have to do now is work on the fabric. The dress that I showed you guys earlier is a long gown. My client wants a short gown, so I'm going to measure from the half length to the length that she wants, and I'm just going to cut this out. I'll be using this remaining piece later in this video. So this is just me checking if it's going to be enough for what I want, and it was enough. So I'm going to be mixing this up with velvet, and this is the color of velvet that I'm going to use for it. You can see that this one gives a bit more contrast, and I'm going to be using this nice blue taffeta as the lining for the bodice. So to be able to work with the velvet, I'm going to iron clothes stay to it, because you know velvet is stretchy, and due to the texture it's not very easy to work with, especially when you're using a domestic sewing machine. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the lining for the back using the pattern that I have before I work with the velvet. So this is on fold, the lining is on fold, and I'm just going to place my back pattern on it and cut it out. While I'm cutting this out, I'm going to add 1/2 inch sewing allowance to the neckline and to the armhole and shoulder point as well. That is going to be my joining allowance. If you don't do that, you are going to have a shortage when you join your fabric together. So keep that in mind. I will not be adding to the sides because I already did that when drafting the pattern. And then I'm also going to add 1/2 inch to the bottom of the pattern for joining the bodice to the skirt parts. I'm just going to copy and paste this on my velvet. For the back, I'm going to be using the blue velvet. You can see that I cut exact, and that's because I already added the allowance, the 1/2 inch allowance to the lining. So I'll just cut exactly what I have on my velvet piece. So this is all for the back part of this bodice. Let's move on to the front piece. The center front has to be cut on fold, so I'm just pinning the center front to the folded edge of the lining before cutting this out, and then I just placed the side front beside it. So you can see that I added 1/2 inch sewing allowance to the armhole. I'm also going to add 1/2 inch all round, and this is going to be for joining the center front, the side front. Then I also added 1/2 inch at the hemline for joining the bodice to the skirts. For the center front, you can see that I also added 1/2 inch all round. So I'm just going to go ahead and also copy and paste this to my velvet, but I'm not going to be using this velvet for the center front because I want this to have a kind of design. So for the center front, I'm going to be using sequins instead of this royal blue velvet. So this is me trying to explain what I want. So I just pinned the lining to the sequin before cutting it out. I have not yet ironed stay to the sequin, but I'm going to go ahead and do that before I continue sewing the pieces together so that the sequins will be more stable when I'm sewing it and it will have a better fitting. So for the yoke is just this little thing here for the neck. I'm going to be cutting this in 4 places. I want to use this velvet for both the front and the lining so that when I face this together, that's when I join them together and turn it out, it's going to be looking more neat. Because if I use this lining to face the front part of the yoke, is not going to look really nice because it's going to be showing. So I cut this in 4 places, and this is what I have for the front pattern. I've gone ahead to cut everything out, and I've also ironed stayed in the sequin. So before we continue sewing, we have to pad the bustier. So let's get right into that. Note that I'm using wording to pad the bustier, and I'm using the medium size. So I'm going to place my center front on the wording, and I'm going to allow this to stop 1/2 inch below my bust, my under bust, and I'm just going to cut this out. And that's all for the center of this bustier. And now for the sides, I'm just going to cut like half of a circle. You're going to just pay attention to the way that I'm placing this. I have this on fold because I'm cutting for both sides of the bustier, that's the left side and the right side. So I'm going to allow this to stop 1/2 inch half of an inch below my under bust, and I'm just using my hand to show you guys what I want to cut out. So this is just me cutting the excesses before I cut out the shape that I actually want. So this is what I have, and whatever you're cutting out, you have to make sure that when you join the center front to the side front, both of them are aligning at the neckline like this. You can see what I'm trying to explain here. So this is just me. I'm just going to place this together before I cut out that point so that I will not make the mistake of making it shorter than the wording in the middle, and then I'm just curving the edge out, and I'm just going to separate the wording so that I use this for both sides of the bustier. So the shining side of the wording is what you are going to face the fabric so that you can iron it down and it is going to stay in place, because that shining side has glue on it. So when you place the shining side to the wrong side of the fabric and iron it down, it's going to stay there. So this is how to pad a bustier. This is one of the many ways to pad a bustier. Now I'm going to go ahead and sew all of these pieces together. I'm going to sew the lining separate and the fabric separate after ironing the wording to the fabric. So in order to join it together, I'm going to make sure that the bust point is matching, and I'm just going to sew everything down, starting my stitch from the hem of the bodice. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for both sides, and I'm also going to repeat the same thing for the lining for the front piece. For the back part of this dress, I'm going to go ahead and take in my darts separately on the lining and on the velvet. Then I'm going to turn the lining with the velvet. For the yoke, I'm going to face right sides together. I'm only going to stitch one side. I won't be stitching the shoulder point, so this is where I'm going to be stitching. Okay, I have gone ahead to sew everything down off camera, and this is what I have at the front. After sewing it down, I used my tailor's ham to iron this out. I just spread it out on the tailor's ham and open up the seam, open up the joining, and iron this flat. So also note that after sewing your bustier together, you have to notch it, especially the under bust point. So I also made sure that I notched this after ironing. Okay, so this is me notching the under bust points. Next thing I'm going to do is turn the lining with the front piece. So this is the yoke. You can see that it was only the side going towards the neckline that I stitched down. I didn't stitch the shoulder point, I didn't stitch the sides. So before turning the lining with the front piece, I'm going to place the yoke on the bustier like this. Just pay attention to doing that. I am doing this. I'm doing this so that I can attach the yoke to the bustier in a way that will be very neat both in and out. So I'm just pinning this together first of all. After pinning it down, this is how it's going to look like. Okay, so I'm going to place my lining on it and then pin everything down, making sure that the neck, the center points and the joinings align properly. And I'm going to stitch the neckline and the sides. So that is it for the front. And then for the back, I've gone ahead to take in my dart on the lining and on the velvet. So I'm going to turn the neckline, the sides and the center back together. Okay, the neckline, side and center back. And this is everything after I've joined them together. Also make sure that you notch the neck point, especially that center point, so that it can relax well. So this is what I have. I've gone ahead to iron everything as well off camera. And now we're going to move on to the next step. You can go ahead and join the bodies together separately before attaching it to the skirt. But that's not what I'm doing in this video. This is just me showing you guys an alternative way that you can sew the dress together. So I'm going to attach the front bodice to the front skirt separately, attach the back bodice to the back of the skirt as well separately. So this is what I have. I've gone ahead to open up the sides of the skirt. I'm just going to trim the hem of the front a bit so that everything can be well aligned. You know that this is a basque waistline, so you have to make sure that what you're doing is very accurate. So this is a stretchy material. The skirt is stretchy. I did not iron stay to it. So what I'm going to do is place the bodice on the skirt and pin this down all round. This is not how I'm going to stitch it down. This is just me making sure that everything is secured. So after pinning it down, I will flip it over and transfer the pin. I'll go ahead and stitch this down like this on my sewing machine before I trim out the excesses from the skirt. So take note of that. I'm just transferring the pins, as you can see. So after doing that, I'm going to attach the back bodice to the back of the skirt, making sure that the darts are aligned. You can see that the darts is aligned properly here. So you have to make sure that you have darts. Okay, I'm going to attach this together. Now I'm going to go ahead and sew all of this together using the 1/2 inch allowance that I added when I was cutting the fabric. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. So this is what it looks like. I've gone ahead to sew everything down. The reason why this front piece is looking like this is because I have not yet cut off the excess from the skirt. So I'm going to cut that out now. And you see that everything is going to lay flat. So the reason why I actually did it like this is because the material is very stretchy. So if I decide to cut it out before joining together, it might expand more than I want it to. So this is the front piece. There was a little error in this side, but I've gone ahead to correct this. What I'm going to do now is join the sides together. There is a bit of excess on the skirt, which I'm going to trim out, so you guys should just ignore that part of the skirt. So when you're joining this together, you have to make sure that the bodies align at the back and at the sides as well. So this is me trimming of the excess that I was telling you guys about. So I'm going to go ahead and join the sides using the sewing allowance which I left earlier. I used 1.5 inch sewing allowance, so I'm going to use 1 inch sewing allowance because I already used 1/2 inch to turn the velvet with the lining. Next thing I want to do is join the shoulder together. So I'm going to open this up and turn it together. So I'm going to make sure that I'm facing right sides together for the lining and the fabric, and I'll start stitching from the center point just to make sure that the both of them are aligned properly. So after stitching down one side, I will go ahead and stitch down the other side starting from that center point. Stitching it down like this is going to make the inside and outside of the shoulder to be very neat by the time that I'm done sewing it. So this is what it looks like after sewing it down. You can see that it's looking very neat. So I'm just going to fold it in like this, and then I've joined my shoulder point. Look at how neat this looks. So this is how it looks like. I've not added my zip yet, so I'm just using my hands to hold it at the back to see how it looks like, and it's looking really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and attach my zip using the zip allowance that I added earlier, and then I move on to the next step, which is adding the sleeve. I'm attaching a simple long sleeve to this gown. So before I draft my sleeve block, I'm going to take the roundness of my armhole. So the roundness of my armhole is 18 inches, and I'm going to be using this for drafting my sleeve. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want my sleeve to fit perfectly. So you know that sometimes when you draft your basic sleeve pattern, it does not like fit into the armhole. It's either too wide or not enough, and that's because you did not take your armhole measurement. So that 18 inches that I got for my armhole roundness, I'm going to divide it by 3, and what I got is 6. I'm going to mark that 6 out. Then I'm going to mark my elbow point and my long sleeve point. After that, I'm just going to extend the lines. Next thing I want to do is take the roundness for each of the points, and I'm going to be starting with my armhole. So this 6-inch line that I marked is where I'm going to take my armhole roundness. My armhole roundness is 18 divided by 2 will give me 9. So I'm going to mark that out. I'm going to take my elbow roundness as well, and my long sleeve point, the roundness there as well. So what I'm going to do is find the midpoint between the first line and that 6-inch line, which is 3. Okay, I'm also going to find the midpoint between the 9-inch mark. After identifying the 2 points, I'm just going to make an X mark, which will serve as a guide for drawing out my slant line. Okay, so after drawing out the slant line, I'm going to find the midpoint between the first intersection and the other one. Just like you can see the way I placed the tape on it. So it's divided into 2 parts. So the parts going towards the center, I'm going to come up by 1/2 inch, and the part going towards the side, I will go down by 1/2 inch and connect this with a curve. Just like when you are drawing a graph, that isn't that one side go up and then it passes the line and then it goes down. So that's what I'm trying to do here. Note that for the parts going towards the side, I marked 0.25 mark and 1/2 inch mark, and that's because there's a difference between the back and the front sleeve. So when I'm cutting this out, I'm going to first of all cut through the 0.25 mark before I cut through the 1/2 inch. So the part that is 0.25 will be facing the back, and the part that is 0.5 will be for the front. You know that when you draft your basic bodice block, you go in for the front by 1/2 inch, and for the back of the armhole, you don't. Remember that when you draft your basic bodice block, for the front armhole, you usually go in by 1/2 inch, and then for the back, you don't go in by 1/2 inch, you just connect the armhole curve like that. So that is the reason why I'm using these 2 different curve for the front and the back. So the back is going to be the 0.25 mark, and the front is going to be the 0.5 inch mark. So just pay attention to the way I'm going to cut this on my fabric. I did not add 0.5 inch sewing allowance to the top because I'm still going to make a little bit of adjustment. So when I'm cutting, I will not cut through the 0.5 inch mark at the side. I'm going to cut through the 0.25 inch on both of the brown paper, not just one of them. I'm going to cut through the both of them at the same time. So this is on fold. If I didn't mention that earlier, this is on fold. So after cutting through everything, I'm going to open it up, and then on one side I will cut through the 0.25 inch mark, which means that one side is going to be 0.5 inch and the other side is going to be 0.25 inch. And remember, I said the part that is 0.5 inch will be for the front, and the part that is 0.25 inch will be for the back. You can see that when I finished cutting everything out, I ended up cutting out that extra 0.25 inch that was left on one side. So I'm going to label this part as the front so that I will not mix it up, and this is the back. So that is all for drafting the long sleeve pattern, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut this on my fabric. I'm going to cut exactly what I have on the pattern on the fabric, except for the top part, because remember I have not yet added my 1/2 inch sewing allowance. So I'm going to add it now that I am cutting on the fabric. So after cutting my sleeve, I just go ahead and join the sides together and attach it to my gown. Remember to not mix the front part of the sleeve with the back part of the sleeve. And this is the fitting after I finished joining everything together. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. I have more videos coming soon, so please like and subscribe for more videos. And by the way, if you are wondering if there's a tutorial on the dress you can see behind me, Yes, there is. You can just check my YouTube channel page and you'll find the video there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.